Hey, Nathan.
Good morning.
Unless folks show up with agendas today, I'm leaning toward keeping this one a quick one.
Yeah, I took a vacation here last week, so I'm a week behind everybody. Again, started on the new year.
I mean, on the good side, you missed nothing from this group. All right, looks like most of the regulars here. Does anybody have any topics they want to talk about today? Auth scopes for search. Yeah, if we want to talk about that, Rom, feel free to lead off with that.
Yeah, so we are having this discussion over at the CNCF artifacts side about whether there is interest in uh, s- mm, search capability inside OCI registries. And we can start that off as a OCI extension, and maybe it's a little premature to talk about that, but without a buy-in from all the other folks. But anyway, I'll just introduce the idea. So if you have a ability to uh, search, then the requirement then becomes that that search is no longer tied to a particular repository, because you don't know which repository you're going to search in, or it's a list of repositories, right? So when you go and get your bearer token, what should be the scope of those operations? Is it everything, and so on and so forth?
I get the feeling search is going to be initially implemented as an extension. So you're going to be hitting like a global extension API, correct?
Correct. Yes, there is one. And there is one. There is that facility in OCI distribution spec today. Yes.
Okay. So when you make that query to the extension, I think the registry will respond back. Here is your scope that you need to be requesting when you get this. Now, if registries are going to support that would be probably a different question. And I would kind of throw that out to folks like Nathan and Jeff and Sajay, that when you're thinking about a registry that's got, a large cloud registry with a lot of customer data, what are your thoughts on global APIs? Is that something that you would even consider supporting, or do you have thoughts on how that could be supported on a registry like yours?
Well, I can talk for Quit.io. We do have global APIs, but those are like for searching, but those are restricted to public repos. So we can have like again, like OCI doesn't differentiate between public and private repos, but like other registries do. And our search functionality is just for public. Like you can search across all the public repos.
I can share some data here. For Microsoft, I think the MCR team, they do something similar where they've enabled a bunch of search APIs on public repositories. There is an internal index also, but that's also a very custom API. The challenge has been, what's the user experience that people want, right? Like, just searching by, is it more like a CLI based search, or is it something like you want to search for some specific image given that it has some readme or some vulnerability? Those kind of searches are what people typically tend to do. So how do you enable more? I mean, I think it comes down to what is the final experience that we're targeting, not just the fact of throwing an API over the fence. In some ways, is what we have debated, but we don't have any specific thoughts around this yet. But yes, we would like to see like an extension. The challenge for overarching repository searches has been, how do we make sure we are searching across the scopes of the correct repository? So whatever system you use, IAM or ABAC or whatever underlying security system you use, that being able to intersect with the repository scopes has been the one challenge that we have constantly faced on how to do this efficiently. It's a pretty tough implementation per se if we want to do anything that intersects those two.
Are you talking about like relating scopes from an Auth server to
Right.
resources on the registry?
Right. So if you have a set of repositories that are team specific or some logical grouping and some security boundary,
Yep.
and search needs to honor that, right? Like, so otherwise you're going to have information disclosure. So the problems have been, how do we plug in a system that can translate between these two concepts?
Yeah, the same problem we're trying to solve right now. One, I guess, a hacky way of doing it is have the association done by like an admin or something. So, for example, if you're using OIDC, you can have a claim for groups that a user is part of, and then on the registry side, you have a mapping which maps the OIDC groups to either repos or organizations which can contain repos. Again, like this is very specific to how we do it, but it's not an OCI thing.
And not an OCI thing yet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if we want, we can add that kind of RBAC mapping.
Jeff.
Sorry, apparently I can unmute now somehow.
Yeah.
So I guess how much details are there on like the search proposal or how people might think about doing that? Because I think, yeah, doing anything with access control with search is going to open up a massive can of worms. To the point where I would say that's probably going to be like an implementation detail of some registries will probably offer search on public repositories, but not anything private or anything with access control related, or they may choose not to. I guess, is this very much like a, yeah, I just don't know anything about like the proposal and what is in there. Are we talking just like names? Are we talking media types? Are we talking artifact types? I don't know. Because I could see there just being a broadly generic, yeah, you have the ability to search public things, but we can't really do individual scopes on every possible repository. That would be gross. Unless we just like a wildcard system where we can just say, hey, you have access to star public. I don't know.
So that's one of the reasons why we've even stepped away from catalog listing. A very simple thing like that itself is a big problem when you have cross like wildcard systems is what we kind of like we're going down with for Azure for ACR is what I know. So it's hard because there's no inherent notion of wildcard in the repository concept, right? Like OCI has no notion of something slash. It's been by convention, like Docker Hub and other folks have decided to kind of use that prefix as a way to group things and come up with a logical boundary.
I mean, I would say, yeah, even though there is a prefix in there, in terms of current registry functionality, that there is no wildcard, there is no prefix. It is still, we check every individual repository. There is no, hey, can I get full access to, my name /star. It is a very specific repository. So I mean, we would have to build out some prefixing mechanism as well, but I just don't know how this is going to work inside of like an OCI standard where there's not really any concept of namespacing or grouping or anything in there.
No, so I did sign up for a proposal, so that's an action item on me. So at least I'm just going to propose this based on our experience on Zot side, because Zot has a Zot specific extension for search. And we have implemented that. And of course, it's not this case. So all our Zot deployments are mostly at end users. So they set up a mirror and they can search within those smaller deployments, or it's in our CI/CD pipeline, which is not at the scale of cloud deployment. So it works well there. But overall, what I would like to take from there is just pull out some common patterns, some things that have worked well for us, and propose those patterns, and let's see how folks react to it.
Thanks. Follow-up question is, I don't know enough about Zot. For Zot, we have a support for multiple repositories and users can be scoped to specific repos, right? And does your search kind of like make sure, like, do you have a pattern to kind of like scope your searches to those specific?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, I can point you to a public deployment of Zot, and you can just go and try out the search there. Let's see.
Oh, nice.
And Rob, your search isn't like the Docker V1 search. It's like a GraphQL search, correct?
That is correct. Yes. So login as anonymous and guest and try it out. Let me, is it okay if I share the screen? Let's still go over this.
Sure.
Right, so these are just some bunch of public images that we have built and pushed, right, just to see. So things that we have implemented are, at the end, there is a GraphQL endpoint. GraphQL is nice because it can, it's really, loosely speaking, a join across RESTful APIs, right? That's the primary goal of that design. So, so all these queries are basically, these are all prefix queries, right? So, and then I can start doing tag based. So as soon as you put a colon, you get a tag based queries and so on and so forth, right? And then there is an ability to query by SHA-SUM. So let's say that you have a SHA-SUM in any SHA-SUM, it could be any layer SHA-SUM, doesn't matter. So let's say, let's just pick something. So you can go and figure out where that SHA-SUM is in which image and so on and so forth. So there's also, the GraphQL also has the ability to search by CVs and things like that. So I would not bring up CVs specifically. I would rather bring it up with some interesting, I would put it in the bucket of some interesting metadata. Because once you start pushing SBOMs and maybe CV lists and so on and so forth. And on the Aura side, I think there's some discussion on also putting things like Helm charts, Argo CDs, metadata, and so on, right? So a lot of things are going to end up here, and when that happens, it is becoming a bucket of lots of things, and search starts bubbling up in terms of use cases and importance. So I think the pattern should be how do we basically index all that and return the search results over a reasonable API.
So you maintain your own indexes, right? Like you actually ingest the
That's correct.
data.
Yes. It's because Zot's primary use case was to be a very tiny registry. So we use it's a local index using BoldDB because it's a Go binary, right? So, but it is scaling pretty well actually. For our use case, it's been scaling really well. So we have, I think, I would say around about 100 terabytes is roughly our within our org, and that's the size of deployments, and it's handling it pretty okay.
Cool.
So it could be search by name, search by type, search by annotation, search by artifact type, search by something inside the artifacts. So basically both an index and inverted index. There are use cases for both. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of merit to a good search type of thing. I mean, right now we basically just dump everything into Elasticsearch and use that as sort of a dumping ground for making search performant.
Yeah.
But I think regarding to the specific how we would handle auth scoping, because right now the way the auth scopes work are very specific to this resource type or this resource class and this action against that resource. I don't know if you're trying to search across, an entire registry, we clearly can't ask for search permission on, a million resources. That's not really going to work. So there'd have to be some sort of a wild card or a very generic, hey, you have access to. So I don't know, maybe public searches are a given and anything else is sort of I don't know. There'd be a lot to figure out on that one as far as what the actual auth scopes would look like. I think the actual implementation of a search would be interesting. I think personally, I don't think anyone at Docker would want to do GraphQL or even touch it with a 100-foot pole. But I know that's probably more of a tech question, an implementation question, more than anything else. Yeah, I think the specific scopes would be interesting to noodle out.
Yeah, that's why I think it's as a first step. I think it's reasonable to propose this as an extension, and then we'll see where it goes.
Anything else on that topic? Thanks for bringing that one up, Rob. Nothing else on the agenda. Do we want to talk about potential next step kind of things for the group? Or does everybody just want to get back to returning from holidays and a pile of emails?
I guess it would be nice to define some next steps as far as where are we on PRs on some of the current things, and kind of where do we view next steps for the working group as far as producing some sort of output.
Let's see. Ruby implementation still needs a review to approve, unless people are waiting for me to go through and verify some of these edge cases I didn't think were that important. So that's one that Jeff, you had reviewed already. And so we just need one more person from here. For some reason, Sajay, we didn't put you down as an owner in this group. What's up with that? How do you keep getting out of being owners of every group out there?
I've successfully stayed away from that.
Avoid all responsibility at all cost. I'm just going to start nominating you for things. So this might be one for either Ram or Nathan. Has got you in there for the comment. Does that mean you're a co-owner? That's what I need to check. Yeah, I mean, we've got Mike Brown here and he hasn't shown up to anything. What's up with that? I feel okay picking on him just because I former coworker. But yeah, Toddy, Jason, Rom, or myself, and I can't review my own thing. So that one's sitting out there. What else do we have sitting out here? And then I threw some use cases out there. Minor update to that. Only 24 hours a day, but Toddy nominates himself for a bunch of stuff.
On the use cases one, this came up recently. We've been trying to throw together, so I mean, it's maybe an experiment, but might be interesting to just talk about it. So one of the challenges is being able to kind of access the registry from a browser, and CORS comes up in so many different places. And we don't enable like opening up CORS or building a UI on top of a registry that's not on the same domain. So we've been a couple of folks on the MCR team have been trying to kind of like just throw together a simple React application that will help you access these things. And the CORS problem kind of like is exacerbated in multiple places. Is that something that people care about? If not, then I just table it, and then once we have something working, maybe we can bring it forward. Yeah, I think Ram kind of talks about this, and we don't want to throw the UI in front of the same API set. It's hosting, scalability, deployment, speed, and all those stuff. And these are stable APIs against which you want to query. So
I'm trying to think. I thought at one point John had written there's a tool hosted somewhere out on Google Cloud Run or something where you can browse what's in repositories, and it's a UI app running on Cloud Run. I forget the name of it.
DGCR, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
John wrote that. And I think that's do you need compute for that? I mean, that's the primary question we've been having, like, because of the proxying of cores and things like that, and being able to not do everything in the browser seems one of the tough ones. So unfortunately I'm derailing, so I'll keep quiet now. I'll come back later when we have something more concrete. The reason why I brought it up is in the use case document, Brandon, you have called out CDNs and HTTP redirection. And this was also in the model of how do we build other user experiences like access from the browser itself. Is that in scope or not in scope? Or maybe I should open another issue to kind of tackle that.
So in the use cases I have called out, look at this, because that was always your use case when you were talking about the CDNs and HTTP redirects. Are we saying we want to extend that with just CORS issues or browser issues or combination of everything?
What I can do is once these folks have something working and can articulate the problem, I'll ask them to maybe open an issue on how to kind of like how registry implementers can enable maybe CORS or support for this so that you can extend this. Right now, there's no language around this. And it might be custom implementation. So maybe the issue will just get closed, but at least there'll be some log of why this is important to implement. Because I'm guessing like as more and more of these, I mean, if John had to write an application and it had to be hosted on Cloud Run, technically you could have done without the Cloud Run also, right? So
yeah, the WASM group this morning that was talking about a bunch of OCI stuff, one of their comments was they were explicitly excluding all the browser use cases from everything they were developing right now because they didn't want to try to deal with it.
okay, good.
Not just the CORS issues, but also when browsers are looking for WASI stuff, they're looking to talk to a specific URL and grab that binary blob back from the location, and registries are looking for connect here, authenticate in, then go query the manifest and look through the manifest list, parse that JSON. Stuff that browsers didn't want to necessarily have to do to pull in a WASI artifact. So that was part of the reason, and authentication was one of those components in there, because they were saying, what if we just went straight to the blob? And I said, well, you still have to authenticate in. Not sure how much that affects all their use cases. Not sure how much CORS would affect that. I would think, is CORS all content or just like the scripts and binary kind of content?
Anything you access back. So we wanted to do something simple like V2 catalog or even just show the manifest. All those calls get, and it gets compounded the moment because you have redirects from the target as well, right? So if you do a blob, you get a SAS back, then you have to follow that. So it's all over the place.
Yeah, the reason I was asking Ram was you can always link to a remote website, but then you're no longer within your current page. And I think that's when you get some of those issues when you're making internal HTTP requests within your web browser or something like that to go to a different site within the same page, you know, not just a direct link out and going some other site. Am I phrasing that at all remotely legibly?
I think Ram is kind of pointing out the fact that Zot has come across these problems already, right? Like, and they had to make choices that, I don't know, Ram, if you had a choice, would you actually run the UI on the registry?
Yeah, for our use case, it's mostly, yes, okay. So I would say it's a depends, the engineer answer, right? So
Right.
let's start with that. So Yeah, for us, the complaints that we have heard is, yeah, so we are an on-prem use case mostly, and which means that if you go with Go Harbor and things like that, then you have a lot of components that you need to manage internally. They have their own Postgres or MySQL database, which is separate from lots of things. And so when you start pulling in all of these things, each one of them has to be individually managed. Each one of them has, and apart from that, you have to manage the interactions between them. If there is load on one, what happens to the other, and so on and so forth. So for the sake of simplicity, I think we went with this model and it has worked out so far. But if it goes to, but this has the problem that if you want to make any changes on the UI and scale it independent of the backend, then you can't do that. You'll have to sort of separately deploy them. And if you say separately deploy them, then you can run into all of these course issues.
I think where I was going with my comment that I couldn't phrase properly was that if you have JavaScript that's making an HTTP request inside of the web page, you're going to hit CORS issues when you try to have the JavaScript go out and make that query. If you just had a link going straight out to the other content and the browser was following that link, I don't think you hit the CORS issues in that case. It's like hitting a Google search result. You're linking off to another site.
So we in Koi.io we have two different domains, one which serves the UI and the other one which serves the registry calls. And like we have CORS token between those two, but it's not really necessary. Like if you have, so what is the problem here we're trying to solve? Like cross-domain access is not allowed on the browser, so you'll have to add like a access control allow origin header. That pretty much takes care of CORS. So this access control allow origin header is added on the client side, if I'm not wrong. So they will allow, so if like say you're running a UI.registry.com, then it wants to have access to something which is outside of its domain, then they will say in allow origin, they'll allow the registry domain. That should pretty much take care of it, right? Am I missing something?
The server has to match what you send. The server will ultimately strip out and send back where the server says it can be responded to. So yeah, the server will reinforce what the client says or the other way around or something. But yeah, you cannot solve CORS just on client side. You would have to make a server side change as well.
Yes, and that server is the one that's serving the UI, correct?
That server is the one that's returning the data that you're requesting.
Hmm.
If you have a UI and an API server, the API server that the UI is querying would have to get back that header.
But I guess going back to the original question, is the hope question suggestion something to make CORS support part of the distribution spec? Or what is the ultimate ask here, I guess?
Maybe I can phrase it as there's a set of use cases where people want to build like a UI, like consider search UI or anything like that. Now, if that is hosted as an extension on distribution spec, or if it's hosted on some other place, the communication between this has to be like, how do we enable a set of APIs to make that happen? Today, we have to run everything together, like what Ram is kind of alluding to with Zot. Like everything is on the same domain or a set of enabled domains, and it's fine. But you cannot partition the app in some way that you have a UI and search that can be deployed separately over maybe one or multiple registries. So because of all the authentication issues and possibly these things like CORS that exist, what I can do, at least take an action item on my side, is let the team make some progress with this and let them maybe write up something. Like this is from the Microsoft Container Registry team. They have been trying to do something that can look at 2 different registries at least, and then collapse this. But there's no possibility of having a UI that spans across both registries unless the cores and all that is kind of sorted out, and authentication also.
And the direction I feel like you're going is you want to make something like the Explorer GGCR,
Correct,
but
correct.
implemented inside of JavaScript in the browser, not on the
Right.
server that's giving you an API to query.
Yep.
Sorry, if we have the allow origin header set, then pretty much the course problem is solved, right? Like, am I missing something here?
The server needs to, your registry server
would need
needs to support that.
Yes, so that's a setting on the registry side to allow the I guess the UI server to access the API calls, right?
Yeah, but you may not want that. You may want to say something more stricter. So that it all depends on the deployment. So
You're not going to get, I don't know, like, would Quay be okay to adding a course header for some random UI app that's running?
No.
I think that's the challenge here. Like, and people want to build on the browser, right? So how do we light this up so that this might be bigger than this group? So sorry for derailing it, but I think this is a use case that's kind of come up recently for us.
Yeah, and it kind of also is only on the browser, because the same API call will work on like a terminal with curl.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing of there's not really any security implications because 90% of the traffic is all through the API anyway, which doesn't check any of this. And so functionally speaking, every registry agreeing to just set a allow cross origin star, it isn't really any different or any less insecure because of it. But yeah, I would say that has to be part of the distribution spec to kind of do that though. And or whatever other specs we have to modify.
Yeah, it could be an option to set origin as star, like allow origin as star, if you want to build a UI on top of, or like a fully client-side UI on top of whatever registry API you want to have.
yeah, so for example, the container images may have URLs in them pointing at random places. So that is something that you have to be careful about, right? So there are some implications.
Here, WASM comment there. Sajay, I'm guessing WASM probably has similar CORS restrictions. Otherwise, people would be using WASM to bypass CORS. All right, anything else on that? And kind of goes back to the add use cases. We can always add more use cases. I just threw this together, kind of pulling up some of the notes from before. Yeah, Sajay, if you're going to put approves on this, I'm just going to nominate you to be a maintainer. There's no way around this.
You have enough people. If it starts getting slower for approvals, then I'll pitch in.
My Moby one's been sitting out there for a long while. It's been sitting out there since September. Oh, I got the other approve. Okay, now we can merge that one. Okay. Thank you, Rob. All right, other next steps that we want to talk about? Feel like our use cases here kept very simple. A lot of times working groups tend to spend a lot of time going through all the different use cases and scenarios and coming up with different things we want to do. And this one isn't going to go through that same effort because everybody has a very simple goal of don't break everything that already works. So the use cases, what have we already been doing? Do we want to jump straight into just making proposals and people starting to draft some of those up? And if so, do folks have time to work on that? That second half of the question was the gotcha there, wasn't it? I'm going to take the silence as a lot of us are just too busy with too many other things at once here and just no free time for a bunch of these things. Should we leave it there for the day or anything else you want to cover today? Sajay, you're either in deep thought, ready to say something, or you're ready to say goodbye.
No, I think we need to put some action items. That's what Jeff was talking about, right? Like, and we need to get to a point where I would say first cut whatever Docker has as the authentication spec, and a good proposal might be good enough to start with. And let's see if we can at least get a PR out to distribution spec, or at least in this working group as a markdown somewhere.
I think a starting point for us would be a PR to our own repo.
Yeah.
And we've got, let me just pull up the folders here, see if we have any folder specifically for that in ours yet. We've got our documentation. We've got implementations in there, but we can make another directory under docs for proposals. And if anybody wants to create the first one, feel free to. I think right now it's just trying to find someone that's got the time to do that. And I don't see a lot of people scream if they've got free time right now. Anything else for us? Going once, going twice. Otherwise, I'm shoveling a snowy sidewalk. All right, folks.
Take care.
Until next time, thanks for coming on out. Good conversations. Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Ajay. Good topics to discuss.
Thank you all.
You.
Bye.
Bye. Have a nice
Bye.
day.